And there we go. The meeting is officially being recorded, which means we can get started. So welcome again, everybody, to session number 2. Today is all about right people in the right seats. So if we look at our deck here, hold on. Why is it not moving forward? There we go. So if you remember, last week we talked about vision and goals. Today we're talking about having the right people in the right seats and how we're going to grow our organizations. Next week we'll be talking about processes and data. And then we'll pull it all together in week 4 and talk about how you can market to your customers and put forth some really, really impactful messaging that brings them in as a customer. Today's agenda. So number 1, we'll spend a quick amount of time just quickly reviewing the concepts that we covered on last week, like a 5-minute express overview. Of course, if anybody has questions, let's get those out there. Let's ask whatever questions we can on what we covered the last time. Then we'll go in and talk about this concept of right people, separate than the second topic of right seats. We're going to talk about a specific tool that you can use in your organizations today called the People Analyzer. And I know that a lot of you guys are solopreneurs, where you're maybe one person working for yourself, but at the same time, you're going to grow your business. You're going to eventually bring in new people. So this will be something that's helpful. And really, any solopreneur also usually has some supporting staff, a virtual assistant, a bookkeeper, things like that. So these tools can also help you make sure you bring the right people into those roles, people you enjoy working with and people who can be really effective at their jobs. So we're going to talk about the right people, this tool called the People Analyzer. Then we're going to talk about the concept of the right seats. The tool we teach for that is something called the accountability chart. So we're going to walk through that today. We talked about it a little bit in the last session. And then, of course, we'll have some time at the end for any questions that you need answered, whether it be related to last week's topic, this week's topic, anything else that's on the horizon. We're here to help and make sure you get what you need out of today. Is there anybody else new on our call today besides David? All right. Well, David, do you want to introduce yourself real quick to the group? Everybody else got an opportunity to do that last week.
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Because I'm in the car.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So a couple of people know me, namely Shnia Wordy and Shua Wordy, Rabbi Wordy. Hello, guys. They know me as Cousin Dave and as Crazy Fisherman, but my business starting out years ago, I had a millwork shop, and I did a lot of custom high-end millwork, cabinetry, and furniture for 4- and 5-star and boutique hotels. And I morphed that into adding glass and ornamental metal. So I started not only working with hotels, but I branched out into high-rise condos in the city, doing everything from lobby and amenity space, millwork, to medicine cabinets, vanities, and kitchens in the apartments themselves for large projects, not like one-offs. I did that for about 10 years, and then for the last 14 years before COVID, I was a manufacturer's repping companies like that to my clients. So as you put it, I am a solopreneur. I had been a solopreneur for many years. And then recently I joined another millwork shop in Brooklyn Millworks, to help them grow their business. So, I'm just looking for a better way, a better mousetrap, so to speak, to help me grow the business, grow their business, attract and retain new clients, etc. And lastly, we have a full general contracting business in addition to the millwork shop. So we will do complete townhouse renovations, apartments in Brooklyn or the city, complete houses, and that's what I do.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And if anybody has some opportunity to network, and if you can help out on David, and David, obviously, you got to know everybody through the intros of the recording. So obviously, if there's anybody here,
yes,
that you'd like to talk to, feel free to reach out to them and, build some connections. We all help each other out.
And
all right.
If anyone wants to go fishing, I'm your guy.
Yeah. All right. Depends on where and what fish. I actually just noticed today my beard matches deck a little bit. No, not gefilte fish, not gefilte fish. All right, so let's move forward into today's agenda. Thank you, David, for that. So let's talk about last week. real quick, right? So last week we talked about this concept, right? We went over the EOS model. We talked about how your business is at the center and how every business under the sun struggles with anywhere from 1 to 200 issues at any given time. And to the degree that you can strengthen these 6 components of your business, that's how you're going to get your business to grow. That's how you're going to get your business to scale. So we talked about the vision component. That's where we really focused last week in terms of who we are as a company, where we're going, what it's going to take to get there. We talked about those 2 components, meaning the 8 questions that you need to answer, plus that you need to get those shared by everybody. Today, we're going to talk about the second component of the business. So I'll come back on that in a second, getting the right people in the right seats. We have our data component, which we'll be covering on next week in terms of how we're tracking the right numbers, activities, and lagging indicators to make sure that the business is growing. We want to make sure that we're talking about and solving issues effectively. That's the 4th component. The 5th is our processes. Again, we'll be talking about that next week in terms of how do we come up with really good processes that'll allow us to scale and do the things that we're really good at consistently. And then finally, we have the traction component. That's the component of doing the things that we need to do to recognize that vision, to make that vision a reality. It's setting rocks, getting those quarterly priorities done, and having the right meetings with the right structure, right? So this is the EOS model, those 6 components that we want to strengthen you in. We talk about businesses. Most businesses are at a 20% strong on average across those 6 components, which is why most businesses do unfortunately fail. Within the EOS model, our goal is to get you to at least 80% strong in each of these 6 components. So the stronger you get with your vision, the stronger you get with your people, your processes, et cetera, that's what's going to get your business going in the right direction, as long as that 80% is your floor. And again, last week we focused in on this specific vision component where we talked about the 8 questions, which are listed on this document that we call the Vision Traction Organizer, right? We talk about our core values, which we're going to come back on today, which is our culture that we're trying to build, the behaviors that we want the people in our organization to exhibit. We've got our core focus, which is the sweet spot for our organization. It's why the business exists, both our purpose, the what, and the niche that we serve. We have our 10-year target or our core target, anywhere from 5 to 30 years out. That GPS coordinate of where we want to go long term, a single stated business goal that will allow us to do a better job of strategically planning leading up to that. We're not planning on that 10-year target, but that's where we're ultimately headed. That's the direction of where this thing is going. We have our marketing strategy that helps us identify who is our target market demographically, psychographically, geographically, where are they located, what's important to them, how big are they, so that we know who we should be speaking to. And then once we have them, we want to tell them what are our 3 uniques, what are the 3 things you get doing business with us that you won't get at our competitors, what's our proven process, what's the way that we do the work for you so we can set expectations and guide that customer through that journey. And then finally, the closer, the guarantee, the thing that we're prepared to lose if things don't go well. Somebody have a question? Okay. Then we have our 3-year picture. The 3-year picture is the last part of that vision. That's where we crystallize the vision. We take that 10-year target. And if I am going to that point in 10 years, if in 10 years from now, I'm going to have 1 million customers, right? If that's my single goal, for example, right? I need to be able to create a very compelling picture for what it's going to look like 3 years from now, so that anybody who's coming into this organization, present company included, has that very clear picture in their mind's eye over what we're trying to build, right? The analogy we gave last time, this is the cover to the puzzle, right? This is the picture that we're trying to build. And once we have that sense for how big we're going to be, how profitable we're going to be, how many locations, how many employees, and all those things that tell us how big the business is, we also want to talk about what the business is going to be functionally, what it's going to look like, what types of awards are we going to have, what types of offices are, what's going to be the experience of a customer or an employee in this business. What's our global notoriety factor? Like, are we winning awards and things like that? We want to create that compelling 3-year picture. And then once we've got that settled, we move to the traction page, which is the here and now. That's the things that we're doing this year. So we have our 1-year plan. We're going to track ourselves. If in 3 years, this is where we need to be, by the end of this year, this is what must happen. We're going to come up with those same measurables. We're going to set 3 to 7 goals for our business for the year. Every department can have their own 3 to 7 goals within the organization. We're then going to figure out what are our rocks, right? Over the course of the next 90 days, what is the progress that I must make reach those goals? What are the big priorities that I have in the business this next quarter that are going to move me closer and closer to all of those targets and goals that we've set out for the year? And then finally, anything that's not covered by the rocks or our planning, but things that we need to deal with and discuss down the road, that's our issues list. Those are the things that we're going to identify, discuss, and solve at our quarterly, at our annual planning sessions, etc. So those are the 8 questions that are on the VTO. By a show of hands, virtual or otherwise, how many people in this room started filling out the VTO for their business since we last met? Okay, good. Let's get a couple more hands.
I have a question about breaking these goals down. Does it need to be linear, or is it more of a bell curve thing?
That's up to you, right?
Okay.
It's some businesses grow differently, so every business is very, very different, right? You might have some companies that have a straight arrow up trajectory where everything just looks really fine. Some companies have like more peaks and valleys, right? Some companies grow like that and then shoot up. Some companies grow up and then they taper off and they level off a little bit. So it's really for you to predict and what you want to see happen, right? So there's no right answer. Like, you know, if you have a 10-year target, it could be that you're making 10% of that progress over the course of 3 years. It could be you're making 80% of that progress. It depends on the speed that you want to grow at. Does that help?
Yes. Another question is where I got stuck. Outside of a facilitator, what's the best environment to go and actually fill this out in a 80% effective way?
Outside of a facilitator, meaning like instead of bringing in somebody to help you fill that out?
Correct.
So I would, how many people do you have on your team like that you work with?
Right now it's 7. I just hired a 7th today.
Okay. So, you know, what I would suggest you do is obviously your circle of trust, the people that you would bring in to make decisions in the business, right? I'm assuming there's probably a couple people in that list of 7 that you probably trust a little bit more than the others, right? More of the managers maybe versus the technicians in your business. And remind me again, what do you do?
Email marketing.
Email marketing, right? So I would sit with your brain trust, which essentially is going to be your leadership team for the time being, at least, and maybe today will help you gain a little clarity on that, and sit and talk about it, right? Like, you know, obviously come up with your own clear vision first, right? And talk about some of the ideas that you have, but share it with them and see what they think. See if they, you know, there might be some opportunities out there that they may have some ideas and indications around. You know, talk to them about what they think, you know, your core values should be. And again, we're going to give a little more context to them today. So I would start it on your own, but then bring in your team, right? Ultimately, they need to share in that vision anyway. So the more you get them involved and you incorporate some of their ideas, the more they're going to actually like feel like they're, you know, they're a part of that too.
Okay. I guess after Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
What's that?
After Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Yeah, I would
is our
imagine
busy
this is
season.
probably a pretty busy week for you to do some of the on the business type of stuff. But you know, this
Levi
week.
Goldfarb você? Pagaste no teu campanha de shows?
מה?
מה לוי גולדפרב עושה? פגשנו כמה פעמים בשואוס.
מה? דיברתי על זה פעם שעברה.
מה הוא עושה? אימייל מרקטינג? הנה מרקטינג, מה הוא עושה?
All right, I just muted whoever that was, Hart. When you're ready to come back, let us know. Levi, so you're solved on that one? I just want to make sure you're solved.
Yep.
All right, cool. Yeah, and again, you can leverage me. I'm more than glad to review it and give you my thoughts and feedback as well. But yeah, get your teams involved because that's ultimately the next part, right? Because once we've got these questions answered, right, the next part of the vision component to get to 100% strong is that vision is shared by all, right? And part of the way we get this vision shared by all is bringing other people into the process. Part of the way that this is shared by all is by sharing it once we do have this vision with the other people in the business so that they know what all those targets are and what we're trying to build. We want to have regular conversations with our people and making sure that they have rocks and making sure that they have their own priorities that are moving the business closer and closer to those goals. So the more we're talking about the answers to these questions, the more they become part of you know, the everyday value that we bring as bosses to the organization, the more people will buy into that, share in that vision with us. There's a famous story. There's a client, another EOS company. They don't work with me. They work with somebody else, but they posted a picture. They laminated copies of their VTO and they leave them in the bathroom in their office. And when people go in and they need reading material, they read the VTO on the toilet. I don't know that I would do that. You know, that's one way to get to SBA. I always just like to say, make sure that one is SBA sanitized by all. after everybody reads that as well. But again, making these the lifeblood of the organization, making these questions that we're talking about part of the everyday conversation is going to help increase that buy-in and get more people driving in that same direction. And when everybody's sharing in that vision, that's how you get to 100% strong. So any questions on last week? Any questions on the VTO? Any questions on vision? We can always come back to them at the end. Going once, going twice. All right, so let's talk about today's topic. Today's topic is really all about people, right? And we talked about having the right people in the right seats, right? So what does right people mean? Who wants to take a guess? What does it mean to be the right people for an organization? Anybody want to guess?
They fit those core values
That's
from the vision.
exactly what we're talking about, right? So we have these core values, these 3 to 7 characteristics or behaviors that we're listing on our VTO as these are the ways that we expect people to show up. This is the way that we make decisions. This is the way that we recruit and hire and fire and reward and recognize employees. So the right people for your organization, as Simcha said, are the people that share your core values, right? So when we talk about what your core values are, we're trying to build something called an intentional culture, right? And you might be one person today, but you're going to grow. And even if you're one person, you want to have certain level of culture that, you know, your customers and your vendors all experience when they work with you. So when we talk about intentional culture, we have this little matrix here. We're going to go through a couple of these like quadrant boxes today. We like our quadrants here, right? So when we look at the left axis is the intentionality scale. The more intentional we're going to be, the healthy scale goes left to right. So the intentional culture is a culture that we have designed for our business, which is healthy, which is helping people grow, which is giving them everything that they need from an expectation perspective, from a leadership perspective. And that's what we've set out to do. An intentional culture is something that we have specifically set out to design and accomplish within our business. That's the goal for everybody. When we have a high level of intentionality, but it's not so healthy, that's what we call command and control. That's the environments where you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. We have a lot of barking of orders and setting expectations without people necessarily being a part of the decision-making process to do those. So that's not really the healthy culture we want to build, right? We've got this chaotic culture, right? Chaotic culture is where it's not healthy at all and it's not intentional. So everything is like kind of flying all over the place and nobody can really define what that culture is. Right? So we don't want to get that. And then you have your healthy but low intentionality. That's your happy accident. We don't really know how this came out, but we have a great culture. We love working with each other here. We're having a great time, but we don't know why that is. And we haven't been intentional about it. So that's what we call a happy accident. So as business owners, we want to live in that intentional culture quadrant, right? So when we think about what that means, right? We want to make sure first off that the culture of our business is both intentional and healthy, right? Intentional are those core values, right? By saying these are the core values and they're real and this is what we hold everybody accountable to throughout this organization. That's the level of intentionality. Healthy means that it's not toxic. It means that we have an environment that's open, where we're honest with each other, where we're vulnerable with each other, we're supportive of each other, where we're cohesive with each other, and we're having fun, right? So the more fun and the more these core values are real, that's how we're going to land in that intentional culture quadrant for the business that we're trying to build. So let's talk about these core values. And again, I have some examples of some core values over here on the right side, right? So things like encourage individual ability and creativity, maintaining accountability, fun, fair, encourage teamwork, no Eeyores, whatever that may be, right? So we have a whole bunch of potential core values. But when we think about core values as a business, and when you're filling out your VTO, core values are discovered. Right? Core values we don't just say, okay, this is what we're going to be. We actually look at ourselves in the mirror and we're going to figure out what our core values actually are. Right? So again, we're going to use these core values to hire, fire, reward, and recognize. We're going to talk about that today, right? Like we talked about that a little bit last time. So today is session 2. Like, how do we use these to hire, fire, reward, and recognize? What are we going to do with them? When we talk about, if our business is a bus, people who share these core values are the people, we talked about this last week, who we want on the bus with us. And then what we want to do is we want to put these core values, when we try to figure out, when we have an idea of what we think our core values should be, we want to put them through 3 filters. Okay. These are 3 very important filters. And the way that we do this exercise, I'll give you a little bit of an accelerator here. The way that we typically would do this exercise with a leadership team, it's in the book Traction, so it's not proprietary here. But basically, you're going to sit and you're going to think about, okay, who are all the people that I work with, that I love, that I want to keep working with, that if I had 100 people like that on my team, I could take over the world, And we start listing those people. And then we look at that list of, let's say, 3 to 7 people. And we want to start writing down what are the things about working with that person that we really like, right? And when we have that list, it might come out to a list that looks like something on your screen. We might end up getting 20, 30 ideas. We may have anywhere from like 7 to 10 ideas. But then we want to put these ideas through the filters to see if they could be our core values, right? We might like working with somebody, but if we don't focus and function the way they do, that's not our core value, right? So the first filter we want to do is we want to make sure that these core values aren't what we call permission to play. Does anybody know what that means, permission to play? Or want to take a guess? Simcha's nodding. I'm going to call on him.
That you wouldn't be in business without them?
Ish, close, right? Like this is what you need in any company, right? That's permission to play, right? Like honest. Like it's up there as a potential core value, honesty. But when you really think about it, honesty is not a core value. It can't be a core value. It's not part of who we are as a business, because every single company under the sun, maybe some law firms, that's the joke I make, but nobody really wants employees who are going to lie and cheat and steal from them. Right. So if it's something that everybody needs, right? If somebody wants, show up to the office professionally, which is what most organizations want, we don't want to make that a core value. That's just, you don't even get in the door if you don't have that type of thing, let alone be part of this company. Right. So things like, like honesty and things like, integrity, or, even like work hard, right? Like what company doesn't want people who work hard and who work smart and who are intelligent? So that's what we call permission to play. If it's one of those things, we don't want to make that a core value. Now, if we can talk about in our organization, we do honesty differently. We are extremely honest with each other, where whenever we have a challenge, we talk about it in the open and we bring it to the meeting, and we're very vulnerable about, the mistakes that we've made and the successes that we have. And we're really super open and honest. And that's how we have to do our business here to build the company we want. Okay, so then that might pass the permission to play filter, and we might allow that as a core value if we can define what honesty looks like in this company different than others. The second filter we want to put it through is something called the aspirational filter, right? We may have this person that we love working with, and the reason why we love working with them is because they're always on time, right? They're always on time, they're always early, they're always thorough, and they send these detailed notes, right? So we may want to make all of those things the core values for our business. But if we ourselves don't do those things, right? If I am not Mr. Punctual, if I am not the type of person that always sends the recaps and is thorough, I can't set that expectation for my team. So it's an aspirational core value in that, yeah, that's lovely. We'd love to be that, but we're not that yet. So if we're not doing that thing, if we're not behaving that way yet as a company, we can't set that as the benchmark or the expectation for all the employees that we bring into this organization. Does that make sense? Right? This has to be our core values, has to be who we are, because ultimately we need to drive accountability. And then the last one is kind of the opposite of an accidental core value. That's what we call an accidental core value, right? An aspirational core value is something that we are not yet, right? Maybe at some point, if we get really good at showing up on time and that's important to our business, maybe we will make it a core value when it does. The accidental core value is something that we are doing today. We are that thing, but it's not going to help us go where we need to go. And maybe we need to stop doing that thing. Right. So I work with a client many of you may have heard of, a company called Fabuwood, right? Cousin Dave, I'm sure you've heard of Fabuwood. They're in a similar industry as you, right? But Fabuwood's a cabinet company, and they have a core value that is on their list, and you see it right when you walk in the building, 100 miles an hour. That's how they run their business. They want people who are moving do the actions, think about the consequences later type of thing, right? And that's their core value. That's how they operate. They're very fast paced. They make big moves quickly. But every single year, when they get back to the table to talk about what their core values are, they ask themselves, is that an accidental core value? Are we going to be able to grow this business, which is now 1,400 people, right? Are we going to be able to continue to grow this business the way we need to if we're all going 100 miles an hour, right? Because at that speed, with that many people, 100 miles an hour might be dangerous. So every year they talk about, okay, maybe we were 10 miles an hour faster than the speed limit, or maybe we drop it down to 80, which is still fast, but not like as dangerous or something like that. How are we going to explain how fast we need to move now to get us where we need to go? But if going 100 miles an hour is going to actually keep us from going where we need to go, and it's going to prevent us from doing the things that we need to do, we do not want to make that a core value. right? So that's the concept of those three filters that you want to put all these potential core values through to discover what your core values should be. But then once we know what those core values are, we have a tool called the People Analyzer that we're going to use to evaluate our people. And it's a very, very simple file to use. It's not a complex name. Like I said last week, this EOS toolbox, nothing here is rocket science, no silver bullets, no magic pills, just simple practical tools that I've been using probably for hundreds of years. So the People Analyzer, I always joke, has anyone here, raise of hands, ever heard of Mitch Hedberg? Hedberg, one of my favorite comedians. There you go. Av Sinensky knows who that is. So Mitch Hedberg, you should listen to his stuff. He's fantastic. He died many years ago, very, very young, but he does these like silly little one-liner jokes that like you roll your eyes more often than not, but it's funny. His delivery is funny. And he has this joke about how he wants one day to be the guy who gets the best job in the world is to be the guy that gets to name kitchen appliances. Because all you got to do is see what it does and add an ER afterwards. So what does that do? It refrigerates things. That's a refrigerator. What does that do? It washes things. That's a washer. What does that thing do? It toasts things. It's a toaster. So what does this thing do? It analyzes people. So this is our People Analyzer, right? Very simple tool. And the way this tool works is you list all of your people down the left column. So you have David, Shonda, Kurt, and Rita, let's just say, are your 4 employees that may work for you. And then you'll notice across the first 5 columns of this, we'll get to the last 3 in a second. The first 5 columns are your 5, let's say you have 5 core values. Obviously, if you have 3 core values, it'll be the first 3 columns. If it's 7, it'll be the first 7. But those 5 core values are the EOS worldwide core values. To do what I do, to be a part of this organization, you must be humbly confident, right? You need to be able to show people that you know what you're talking about, but at the same time, not come off as an arrogant jerk, right? Like we need to do that. Hopefully you guys are getting that impression from me a little bit. We're grow or die, never satisfied with the status quo, always pushing ourselves to a new level of mastery and success. We're help first. I would never take a penny from anybody under the sun unless I've added value and helped them first. We're always going to do the right thing. Sometimes I might have to say something to a client of mine that they don't want to hear that could potentially get me fired, but I'm going to do that because it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to tell them the right things to do. And then there's always do what you say. If I say I'm going to be on a call with you at 2 o'clock, I'm on the call at 2 o'clock. I'm scheduling around it. I'm making sure that I show up. I'm making sure that I'm doing the things that I've committed to, right? So that's how we explain what our 5 core values are. And whatever your core values are, I'm sure you'll be able to explain those as well. But now you're going to ask yourself for each employee, do they share our core value? Yes or no? If they do, in that little box for David, if we say David is humbly confident, we're going to give him a plus. If we see that, you know what, David is not humbly confident, David is arrogant, he's the exact opposite of what humbly confident means, we're going to give him a minus, right? Very sophisticated system here. And let's say somewhere in the middle, let's say sometimes, and we're not talking about David on this call, we're just talking about a random David, just happens to be the name. But let's say that, let's say sometimes David is humbly confident, other times he's too humble, other times he's too confident. It's kind of, you don't know what you're going to get. In the middle, guess what we give him there? It's a plus minus. And we're going to do that for each of the 5 core values. Is David grow or die? Great. He's a plus. Is he help first? Yes. He's always willing to help. He's a plus. Do the right thing. And we're going to keep giving these scores, right? From left to right, a bunch of pluses and plus minuses. You as the leadership team, you as the business owner now, you get to determine what the bar is, right? So if there's 5 core values, you want to set a bar for what it means to be the right person in this company. Usually that bar looks like something that's either 3 pluses and 2 plus minuses, or 4 pluses and 1 plus minus. That's what I would prefer to get to that 80% strong, right? You want to make sure that if somebody's the right person, like 4 of your 5 core values, they got those down solid. And maybe we have 1 questionable, but you don't want to tolerate any minuses, right? Because if somebody is the opposite, if they're never grow or die and they're just completely complacent and never pushing themselves, they're not going to work well, right? They're going to be like, what are you pushing so hard for? Why are you making me push so hard for? Right? If they're not about help first, if they're always like, okay, you help me and then I'll help you, that's going to create an uncomfortable cultural situation in our business, right? So minuses, generally speaking, we don't accept, but you as the business owner get to decide what's the standard we want to hold people to. And if they are above that bar, if they have enough pluses and not too many plus minuses, then congratulations, we now know that this person is the right person for our company. They fit the culture, they meet our core values. And we're going to run this, we can use this People Analyzer in a number of occasions, right? When would we use this People Analyzer? Anybody want to take a guess?
Performance reviews.
Performance reviews is one answer. Yep, sure. What else we got? Who else would think about when we might want to use this People Analyzer?
When hiring?
There's no wrong answer. When you're hiring somebody, right? Like you're about to hire somebody, before you bring them in, you want to make sure that they're going to fit your culture, right? Don't wait until after you bring them in. So that's really, really good. So, right. So how do we use this people analyzer? We're going to set our bar. We're going to use that in the interview and hiring process, right? We want to ask questions in that interview process that are going to give us an indication as to whether or not that person shares our core value. Right. In my old business where I worked before I started doing this, one of our core values, and we ran on EOS there, was something called collaborative integrator, right? A collaborative integrator. We want people working in this company that bring others into the process and get all the pieces running. We don't want somebody who just like takes everything on their own and does it on their own, right? So what we would do is in an interview, you ask a question, putting them in a fictitious situation that would require them to bring people in and collaborate and integrate that collaboration. And if they're able to answer the question in a way that helps you understand that, yeah, this is how they would operate in this business, then you nailed it, right? Like you figured out they are. And if they start answering it the wrong way, you'll know also like maybe we want to stay away from this guy, right? We don't want to cue the witness. We don't want to tell them what we're looking for. We're not going to say, hey, our core value is to be a collaborative integrator. How would you deal with it? You're going to say, how would you deal with that situation? And in theory, if they don't do that, they'll give you the wrong answer, which is sometimes more helpful, right? So we want to really incorporate that. We have our quarterly conversations. Levi, I think it was you that said in performance reviews, right? So in the EOS world, we don't do annual performance reviews. We have those conversations every quarter, right? So every quarter you want to meet with your direct reports and you want to talk to them about how they're doing. And you want to look at that people analyzer. Where are the core values? How are we doing there? Are there any that we need to talk about where we can maybe turn some pluses and minuses into pluses? Or maybe there's a core value that's venturing into that minus land and we need a reverse course over the next 90 days. So you're going to talk about this in your quarterly conversation. You're going to run the people analyzer before that. Performance reviews, if you do annual types of reviews, you want to look at it then. You might just do it when you need clarity. You might have a situation in the business where like somebody's getting on your nerves or you don't know if that person is really the right person for that seat and that you can't figure out what it is about working with them that's bothering you. So when you need that clarity, sit, lock yourself in a room for 5 minutes and run the people analyzer on that person. And I promise you, usually you'll now have that context. Oh, now I know why it's so hard to work with this guy because this guy is not grow or die and I'm grow or die. And that's the way we want to run our business. But every time I ask him to push himself, he's like, no, I'm cool. I'm good doing it. So that's going to help you understand why you're having a hard time when you do it. And it'll help you gain clarity on why you like working with people, right? This guy, every time I come to him, he's got the right answer. Which core value is that's exhibiting? We want to use these words to describe these behaviors. And you want to do it on yourself. Right? Every once in a while, you got to do a checkup from the neck up, so to speak, right? You have to make sure that you're living these core values. For me, that humbly confident one that we were talking about earlier is one that I struggle with sometimes, right? Like there's times where maybe I am coming off maybe a little bit too arrogant because I am very confident in my abilities. But then there's other times where I come off as maybe a little too humble. Right? When you hit that little patch of maybe I'm lacking some confidence or something like that. So maybe you venture too much to that side, right? So ask yourself if you feel like you're not performing or you feel like you want to find an unlock and how you can get better at doing what you're doing for your business, run that people analyzer on yourself and you'll gain clarity that way as well. Right? So that's the right people. But now let's shift the focus to right seats. Okay? So when we talk about right seats, what do we mean? What do you guys think? Right? If right people is they share our core values, what does right seats mean?
The right position for those people.
That's right. Right. So that means they're in the right role in our organization, which means they're good at their job. So let's give a little bit more context to that, because when we talk about this, we're going to talk about a tool called the accountability chart. But before we do that, I want to talk about what are the differences between accountability and responsibility, right? Because ultimately, if somebody is in the right seat, it means they are accountable to do the job that we are asking them to do, which means they get it done. Right. So accountable and responsible are two very, very different things. So you see a picture there of the San Francisco 49ers from the 80s, and there's a football play. And the analogy I'm going to give you here is that you have a quarterback on a football team. Right. There is a very powerful difference between these two terms. When we think about accountability is specific to an individual. Responsibility can be shared. That quarterback, Joe Montana, in that picture, he is the one who is accountable to pick the right plays, to distribute the ball, and determine what this team needs to do to score, right? So he is the only one that's accountable. If you had two quarterbacks in that huddle, it's going to be very, very confusing for people to understand what route they're supposed to do and what their role is in the play. But responsibility can be shared. everybody on that field, everybody in that huddle has a particular job that they have to do to get us into the end zone. The linemen have to block, the receiver has to run to where the right spot is, the running back has to break tackles and go through the hole. So all of the various responsibilities are shared, but ultimately there's one person who's on the hot seat. There's one person who's getting cut if they don't win a bunch of games, who has to answer all the tough questions, and that's the quarterback, right? So accountability, always specific to an individual. I always like to joke, how do you kill a dog? You go away on vacation and you ask two people to feed them while you're gone, right? Because neither person's going to do it. They're going to assume the other person's doing it. So true accountability is one person that's accountable for that result. Accountability is owning the results. Responsibility can be task oriented, right? So the quarterback owns the result of getting us into the end zone. The responsibility is on your particular task within that, right? So also sometimes, right, like somebody's accountable to get something done. Sales, if you're accountable for sales in your organization, it doesn't mean that you're the one who's actually going out and selling, right? You might have a team of salespeople that are individually responsible to do those things, but you're the one who owns the result. So ultimately you're accountable. And when we think about it, accountability is more about the planning, thinking, strategizing, and assessing, whereas responsibility is more about the doing and the executing, right? If you own the results, you're going to put all the pieces into the right place to do the things that we need to do to accomplish that. The responsibility is, okay, now if I'm the one who has to do it, I'm going to do and execute it, or it's bringing the right people in to do that, right? So when we talk about the right seats, the way we're going to do that is using a tool called the accountability chart. And when we think about the accountability chart, raise your hand here. Has anyone seen an org chart before? An organizational chart? Right? Lots of companies have them. It's like a family tree, if you will, and it shows, the name, the person's title, and who reports to who. With our accountability chart, we handle it a little bit differently. Think about it as an organizational chart on steroids, right? And it stems from a premise that every single organization has three main functions, right? Every organization under the sun has a sales and marketing function. That's who has to bring in the business, bring in the dollars, get people to the website, et cetera. Then you have your operations function in every business. That's the person or the team that's accountable to do or provide this product and services that you're selling to your customer. And then you have your finance seat. That's the person who's making sure that there's cash coming in out of the business, that there's a budget, and that we're hitting our forecast and all those. So every business has these three functions. Now, they're not always leadership level. Sometimes operations rolls into finance. Sometimes finance rolls into operations. Sometimes sales and marketing are two distinct seats that get split. So when we build this accountability chart for an organization, the first thing we're going to figure out is what are the major functions in your organization and build it that way. And we're going to figure out what are those main seats. But let's just operate in this basic one where, okay, these are the three seats that we have: marketing, sales, operations, and finance. But then within the EOS accountability chart, we also introduce a concept of somebody called the integrator. Right? The integrator is the person that has a pulse on the entire business. They know a little bit about everything. They're able to reduce obstacles, get people unstuck, encourage good conversations. They're really, really on the execution side of the business, right? They can really, really help on every level. We all know who that person is in our organizations. Sometimes it's ourselves that really have a pulse on everything. So that's the integrator, right? And they're be the one who's managing this team of three and making sure that they're all doing the things that they need to do to get the company going forward. And then we have this other, and what we're going to do is once we figure out who's in these various seats, we're then going to assign roles. So I'm going to go into marketing and sales, and I'm going to say, if you're in this marketing and sales seat, that means that you need to do our social media, and you need to build our website, and you need to go to trade shows, and you need to get leads, and you need to close business. And we're going to identify for each seat specifically what are the 5 roles that you are accountable for. Now, again, if you're in that sales and marketing seat, and one of those roles is to close X number of dollars of business every single year, or to meet your quota on sales every single year, you're not necessarily doing all of that sales on your own. You're going to have a team of people underneath you. So you are accountable for the sales in that organization. It doesn't mean that you're responsible to sell every deal, but we're going to get really, really specific in those roles. And we're going to define what success looks like in each of these seats. We're going to come back on this in a second. But then there's this other role called the visionary, right? So the integrator is the person that's, in the business, really, really helping everybody execute really well. But our visionary, that's a little bit of a different personality, right? The visionary is the person who's got that 30,000 square foot view, a bird's eye view of everything. They're seeing into the future. They have all the big relationships, right? They usually come to every meeting with a bunch of really, really good ideas, but not necessarily executable ideas, right? They see where the industry is going. They're driving the culture of the business. We always like to joke that the visionary is a little bit ADD, right? They're the person who's bringing just like all that energy to the organization and knows where the business needs to go and really projects and manages the vision. The integrator, if the visionary is a little ADD, your integrator is a little bit OCD, right? Your integrator is going to be the person who balances them. And when you think about on the EOS model, right, you had vision on the top, traction on the bottom, right? Vision without traction is a hallucination. So here on our accountability chart, we have our vision at the top, and then we have all those functions in the business, the marketing, operations, and finance. So when we think about what that integrator is taking the vision, bringing it down to the ground, and getting the traction going in the organization. That's their primary responsibility, right? A lot of the times on that accountability chart, we're going to figure out what the 5 roles for the visionary and the integrator are as well. And a lot of times the integrator, one of their roles is to achieve the P&L in the business. That at the end of the day, how do we achieve our P&L? It means we're selling, we're reducing our costs, and we're getting paid. So if all 3 of those operations, sales, marketing, finance are operating well, then our integrator is doing a good job. He's managing that leadership team. The visionary doesn't like having tough conversations. The integrator is very good at having those tough conversations that can really drive that accountability throughout the leadership team. Now, when we think about accountability chart and how we want to build it, right? So for all of you guys now, when you go home today, you could start building out this structure. So you'll be able to look at this, and we're going to do the first thing that we're going to say is structure first, people second. We're not just recreating an organizational chart, an accountability chart based on what we have in our company today, right? We actually want to think out into the future, 6 to 12 months out into the future, and we want to figure out what is the right structure for our business, not what's the structure we have today. Let's build out the functions. Let's build out the seats. Let's understand what needs to happen. And then if we have people that fit the roles, we'll get them in there, right? And we want to start it with the leadership team. So think about what that top level of your organization looks like first. You want to identify all the functions and determine which ones are the core functions. Those will be the leadership team seats. And then for each of those seats, again, like we said, you're going to identify the 5 roles that define success in that seat. And then you're going to fill those seats with people who GWC all the roles, right? So we're going to create that structure. And then when I have the structure for my integrator seat, and I'm going to say, okay, is Sroli the right person for this seat? I'm going to ask 3 questions. Does GWC, it stands for, does he get it? Right? Is Sroli naturally wired for this type of work? Can he be here? Like, would he naturally do this integration work, right? Is Yitzhak naturally wired to do finance? I don't get finance at all. If you were to put me and nominate me for a finance seat, I do not get it. I am out right off the top. The answers to all these questions have to be yes to be in the right seat, right? So that's the first question is, do they get it? The second question we have to ask is, do they want to do this work, right? Does this person genuinely want to do this work? You usually can't motivate somebody to want it. It has to come from themselves, right? So if somebody wants to sell, they're going to be in that sales seat. If you say, hey, you want to be in that sales seat? Yeah, I'll give it a try, but they're not like doing it. Like, you're not going to be able to get that person motivated to do that role. So we want to make sure that the person actually wants to do this job in this company. And then the third question, and probably the hardest one to answer, is if the person's going to be in the right seat, do they have the capacity for this work? Do they have the physical capacity? If Adam's job is that he has to load boxes onto a truck, right, in your warehouse, that's the seat. It says he has to do it, and he's not going to the gym, and he can't really lift weights, and he can't get the boxes where they need to go. He might be lacking the physical capacity, right? If Noach is sitting in 15 different seats in his organization and we want him to focus on sales, he doesn't have the time to do his job. There's a time capacity issue there, right? Let's pick on Eliyahu, right? Let's my friend Mr. Piha over there, right? Let's talk about capacity. Let's say you don't have the emotional capacity for it. Let's say every time you want to put somebody in a sales seat, and every time they go and lose that deal, and the person says, you know what, I'm not interested, they become depressed and they shut down, right? And they're not out there selling more and more, and it really bothers them emotionally. They're lacking the emotional capacity to do that job, right? Let's say Mendel, we want to put him in our operations seat. We have to see, does Mendel have the intellectual capacity to lead our operations function in our business? Is he going to be able to stay on top of industry trends and making sure we have the right processes? Is he going to be able to implement good software and systems that help our operations team operate efficiently? Because if he doesn't have that intellectual capacity, that also could be an issue. Sometimes we have no choice. Sometimes we have to put somebody in a seat because, and a lot of you who are solopreneurs might feel this way, right? Even though they don't have the necessarily the capacity to do it, because we have no other options, we might need to put somebody in that seat. But ultimately, it'll help us gain clarity on where those bottlenecks are and make sure that, we can ultimately build a place where we don't feel overwhelmed and we do have the capacity. right? But once we have that leadership team set, then we have all the leaders repeat those steps 3, 4, and 5 for their teams, right? So now once I know this is what everybody on the leadership team is focused on in their roles, now the sales and marketing team can go out and build out their accountability chart. You know, the operations team will split it into front office and back office operations. Finance will have a controller and you know, and a bookkeeper and a biller, whatever they have on their team, and they get to define what the various seats and accountability are below them using that same structure first, people second methodology. Ultimately, once we get through these steps, right, what you're going to have is something that looks a little bit like this, right? When you get to your accountability chart, where it's not just your leadership team, but every single person is built out, the entire structure for the organization, you've got this family tree, right? You've got, you know, all of the functions, all of the roles. You have your visionary, your integrator, your leadership team, and then within each of those functional departments, we know what are all the other functions and the roles that they have, so everybody can have that extreme clarity on what they're accountable for in their seats. Now, oops, sorry. There's something that it's actually not on this thing, but it should. But anybody here that manages people, right? So you guys see my pointer, right? So if you're in this seat, if you're in this seat and you have somebody reporting to you, if you're in this seat and reporting to you, what's your ultimate job? What's your real job if you have people reporting to you?
To communicate what you want them to do.
Right, which is another way of saying what? Let's get somebody else involved. Come on. I don't want to have to call on people. There's no wrong answers.
Make sure they're doing what they need to be doing.
Right. So we need to make sure that they're accountable. Right. So what we're going to talk about now is a mathematical formula called leadership plus management equals accountability. And again, two similar terms, leadership and management, are two very, very similar things. But when we talk about accountability, right, we all want people who are accountable in our organization that get things done. But what does it mean to be accountable, right? Like, you don't want to hold somebody accountable. Like, I can hold this pen, I can hold the paper, I can hold this remote control, I can hold all these things, but I don't hold a person accountable. When do you hold somebody accountable? When they mess up, right? That's usually when you use those words. I'm going to hold them accountable because they haven't done what they're supposed to do already. So how do we make sure that people are accountable, that we don't have to hold them accountable? And we do this thing called LMA. And when you think about it, anybody who's any of those seats is an integrator. So LMA is leadership plus management equals accountability. I don't know why this is loading that way. But when we think about what leadership is the thinking. It's formulating the visions. It's aligning people. It's thinking into the future. It's showing us where we're going to go long term. It's the strategies. It's being effective. It's about moving the ball forward. It's about dealing with change. That's leadership. Management is in the business. It's thinking. It's actually taking those visions and making them a reality. It's aligning the people. This is a terrible slide. I just realized there's a lot of issues. It's saying the same thing. Management is actually a lot more about the present. It's about the here and now. Hopefully this gets fixed. I'll fix it before I send you guys the thing, right? Instead of it being strategic, it's actually task driven. Instead of it being effective, it's about being efficient. Instead of it being movement, it's about moving. And if instead of it being deal with change, it's actually implementing the change, right? There's a quote by Stephen Covey. I may as well get rid of this slide, but when you think about it, management is helping people climb the ladder to success. Leadership is making sure that it's leaning against the right wall. Right? Our leader in the business is a lot of time the visionary, showing us where we're going, and these are all the right things that we should do. The integrator is the one who's showing us the right way to do them. Right? So that's the differences between leadership and management. But if we're showing everybody where they need to go and we're helping them get where they need to go, then you're going to have true accountability. So let's talk about capacity issues real quick before we get put a bow on this. But capacity issues, right? We talked about, you know, a lot of the times you might have time capacity issues in a seat. Somebody might be sitting in multiple seats, or they may have a lot of roles on their seat and they don't know what to do. So how do we deal with that? So we have a tool here called the Delegate and Elevate tool, right? But first off, you're going to have to let go of the vine, right? A lot of the times people have capacity issues because they're just not willing to let go of some of those tasks. Either they think they're going to do it better than everybody else, or they don't trust the people around them. But if we bring in great people, even though it's scary, sometimes we're going to have to let go of that vine and delegate some things to build capacity. But it's going to require having great people. It's going to require you having great processes. It's going to require that you have the right scorecards and measurables in place so that you can track them and make sure that they're effective in their roles. But what you want to do is you ultimately want to delegate and elevate to unique abilities. So you guys can use this tool. Think about what your average week looks like and all of the tasks and things that you're doing in your business and put them into one of these 4 quadrants, right? We have the things that we love doing and we're great at. We have the which are like me, for example, is teaching classes like this. I love it. I feel like I'm really, really good at it. This is what I love to do. The things that I like doing and that I'm good at are a little bit of a level down, right? If you tell your wife you like her and you don't love her, she might get upset at you, right? So there's a difference between like and love. Love is irrational, like is practical. So then there's the things, yeah, I like doing this. I'm good at doing it. It's not the thing that really vibrates with me the same way as those things that I love and that I'm great at. And we want to put certain things in that box. Then we have the things that I don't like doing that I'm good at, right? I'm good at sending emails that recap notes from a meeting, but I don't like doing that. So, that's something that, I would ideally like to delegate if I want to build capacity. And then finally, and I'm sure we can all think of those things, there's the things that we have to do in our business that not only don't we like doing them, we're not even good at them to begin with, right? And that was, finance to me when I started my business before I hired my bookkeeper. Like, I don't like doing finance. I'm not good at it, but I had no other option. So I'm doing those things. And as you start to grow and as you start to realize that I have these capacity issues, we want to attack it one box at a time. The first box that I want to start delegating naturally is that finance stuff. It's the things that I don't like doing and that I'm not good at doing anyway. We want to delegate those things. Then we can move over into the things that I am good at, but I don't like doing to build capacity. Then I'm going to move on to those things that I like and that I'm good at. And if I could delegate those things, I'm 100% doing what I love and what I'm great at all the time. That's going to elevate my abilities to do my job the way it should be done. It's going to elevate the abilities of all the people that report into me that are now executing those things because they like them and are better at doing them than us. So it's delegating, but elevating that activity because it's been delegated. Right? So that's what we might deal with capacity issues. But when we say the right seat, it's a person who gets their job, who wants their job, and has the capacity for their job. Right? So let's talk, before we end, let's talk about the types of people issues that we might find. Right? So the two types of people issues we might see in an organization are, first off, when we have the right person in the wrong seat. Can anybody explain what that might look like?
Sure, a highly capable, skilled, enthusiastic, good attitude person, but they're just not in the right position. You want them, you value them, they can be an asset, but they're not quite in that right position.
Excellent, excellent. And then let's have somebody else maybe take a crack at what is the wrong person in the right seat. What does that look like? What do you got, Adam?
Where they're good at what they're doing, it's not easy to work with them.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. So I'm going to show you something that's going to blow your mind right now, because this is another one of this is called the performance values matrix, right? So we have our core values, right people scale on the left, and we have our performance there on the right, right? So the first thing we look in that top right corner are the people that share our core values. They're really, really good at their job. Those are what we call the stars, right? And if we have only stars on our team, right people, right seat, we're in a great spot, right? It's the right person in the right seat. It's the ultimate team that are 100% stars. Then we have our puppies. Right? So our puppies, those are the people that do share our core values, right? Like David was saying, right? But they may not be so good at their job. They may not get their job, or they may not have the capacity for their job, right? So the good thing is that that's the right person in the wrong seat. The good thing about those people is that we can train them, right? A puppy can be trained. A puppy can be moved into a different room or a seat. When you think about a puppy, why do we use that? Everybody loves a puppy. But when you turn your back, they're like pooping on your carpet and ripping up your sofa, right? So either we've got to train them not to do those things, or we have to make sure they don't go in the rooms with the carpets and the sofas, right? So same thing in your business. You have that person you love working with. If they're not performing in their role, maybe there's a different seat that they fit into better, or maybe we can train them up so that they do become a star. Then we have our terrorists. Right? That's really what Adam was talking about. That's the wrong person in the right seat. That's somebody who's really, really good at their job. They get it. They want it. They have the capacity to do it, but they don't share your core values. So they're holding you hostage. That's the person who's saying, you can't afford to fire me. Or if you do, I'm taking everybody with me. Right? And they blow the whole thing up behind them. So that's the terrorists. They're causing a lot of collateral damage also, because they might be performing, they might be bringing in the business, but everybody in the company hates working with them. And people might quit. Your good employees might quit because that person's here. Your customers may not like working with that person, even if they're good at their jobs, and they might leave. So we need to make sure we're dealing with those people. And then you have your rats. That's the wrong person, wrong seat. They don't belong in your organization. They're not performing. They're not participating. They just hide out in the dark. And, when we turn on the lights, they go away. We don't want those people, but we want all stars. And when you actually think about it, rats is the opposite of a star, right? Star, right person, right seat. Take that word, flip it backwards. Rats, wrong person, wrong seat. So I always like looking at this. The terrorist thing really, really usually pops with people when you think about what that means. But that's what we're looking at in terms of right people, right? We want those stars. We want to build an organization of stars. And when we get to that point where everybody's the right person in the right seat, that's what 100% strong looks like. So before we get into what we look like, any questions for you guys from you guys?
Next one.
Please. Yeah, what do you got, Noah?
Would you recommend delegating things over first that we don't like doing over things that are just not economical because it just takes us more time doing, meaning one builds positive motivation, the other removes a negative one? Is there like, on a practical, if we're in that position, what we should do if we don't have the option to do both at the same time?
So I would start. It's a good question. Based on the model, right? We want to start with the things, because the bottom side are things that both of them are things that we don't like doing. There's just things that we don't like doing that we're good at, and things that we don't like doing that we're not good at. So the first thing that you have to get off are the things you're not good at, right? Like you want to start to build a smart organization. You can't get stuck making those mistakes yourself without delegating. So I would look at the actual production in the role before we start creating our ideal life. And then once we've obviously gotten rid of all those things that we're not good at, now we could start to fine tune it and make sure, okay, all the things I'm doing, I'm good at, but now let me just focus on doing things I'm great at that I really, really love.
As a solopreneur, what's the value of going through all these different positions and all these different jobs if they're all different hats that I wear?
Good question. So if you're wearing every single seat, it might not be, but it will give you some clarity on where you might be able to scale and grow. Again, if your goal is to stay a solopreneur for the rest of your career, and that's the way your business is, then yeah, you're not necessarily bringing people into those roles. But if you do have plans of growing into the future, you create that framework for where you might need to bring some people in to get them into some of those seats, and you'll have clarity as to where you're going to step out. The other thing is that a lot of solopreneurs do have supporting staff, vendors, contractors, and things like that that they would work with in their organization. So we still want to use this to evaluate them, right? Like if you have a vendor that you're bringing in, you want them to share your core values, or it's not going to be so much fun to work with them. You want them to get and want and have the capacity to do those things you're asking. If you bring in a third-party bookkeeper to work in your company and they don't get finance, you're going to have a problem. Right. So, you can use this not just for internal employees, but like all those 1099s, vendors, et cetera. So it's going to help you build the business you want and structure you want, but also help you manage the resources that you have in the fold today.
Thank you.
No problem.
When
Any other questions?
when hiring people, it seems like to me, I just wanted clarity on it. The rats and the terrorists, there's nothing you can do but get rid of them, but the puppies you can train and move them to a different room. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct, right?
Okay.
If they're puppies, we want them in our organization. They fit culture. I actually was a puppy at a point in time, right? When I started at Blue Switch in 2004, they brought me in to sell, and I couldn't sell. I was terrible at sales, right? But I was a really, really active member in the culture of the business. They wanted me to be in the company, right? And thankfully, they found a different role to put me in. I became project manager, eventually COO, right? So they put me into a different seat, which ended up being a great move, right? So that helped me turn from a puppy into a star, big time, big time. Sometimes it's even, if you look at the seat, there's 5 roles. Maybe it's a salesperson, but they just struggle with like getting leads, right? So maybe we don't need to take him out of the seat, but maybe for this one person, we'll get him somebody who brings him leads so that he doesn't have to do that because he's not good at it. Let's get somebody to bring him the leads. And then once he has the leads, he can do whatever he wants with them. So we want to keep puppies. We want to turn them into stars.
Another question about hiring for the things that you're not good at and don't enjoy. What happens if those 3 things are drastically different? Is it worth it to try to find someone that can kind of fit all those roles, or should I just find contractors or other ways of getting that
So I'm
done?
a big believer. There's a great book by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy called Who Not How, right? Where if you're faced with a challenge as a business owner, as an employee, where there's something that you need to do and you don't know how to do it, instead of trying to figure out how to do it, bring in somebody who can. And I actually just got off a call with somebody who said, yeah, I need somebody to work in my office. I'm having problems with my IT guy, and he'll fix my printer if it's broken, and he'll set us up a new computer, and he'll also design like ads for the products that go in like publications. I'm like, okay, well, those are very different skill sets, right? Yeah, but the guy that I had did all those things. Okay, great. It's going to be very hard for you to find somebody else who's like that. So if you can find that unicorn who could do all of those things, even though they're polar opposites, great, go right ahead, bring that person in. But more than likely, it's a few different people that you might have to bring into a few smaller roles, it seems.
So it sounds like it's worth it to get something right than train a puppy for multiple roles. So hiring multiple people, let's say part-time contractors, to get the things done than training a puppy to go and fill those multiple roles.
Correct. And again, I'm going to go back to the different types of capacity we talk about, right? If the puppy is lacking the intellectual capacity to become a star in that seat, you're going to have to obviously make a realization on that, right? Like some people just aren't trainable, like that you won't be able to get them to do that no matter how much time and energy you devote to it. Cool. And by the way, I don't know if you guys remember, we'll send out the deck, but when you go back to that people analyzer slide, right? If you remember, I told you to ignore the last three columns. The last three columns say get it, want it, capacity for it, right? So after you've given those plus, minus scores for the core values, then you're going to look at the roles and the seat they're in. Do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity? And give them checks. They need all three checks. If you get it and you want it, but you don't have the capacity, you're not in the right seat. If you get it and you have the capacity, but you don't want it, you're not in the right seat. If you want it and you have the capacity, but you just don't get it, you're not in the right seat, right? We need three checks on that one. So
I have a question. I sent it to you in the chat, but I don't think you saw
okay.
it.
Let me
I could
see. I
say
didn't
it.
see it.
I just want to know
now.
if you can give us an idea of the cost of working with a facilitator.
Like me? Somebody like me?
Like you or someone that you recommend. I mean,
So
just
I prefer let's have that conversation offline if that's okay.
Okay.
Again, I'm no problem telling you guys what my fees are, but I want to try to keep that part of this out of this session if that's okay. But I definitely can advise you on that. So we'll get to my phone number in a second. Feel free to text me later. I could probably talk, in a little bit if that's something you want to learn a little bit more about. I see there's another question here. Noah, should I read out? Oh, you asked me that question already. Good. Very good. So we got to that question. Any other questions? All right. Just like last week, I have a link here, a QR code with a link to a form. It's like 4 quick questions. It'll take you 2 minutes. I would like to know how we're doing. We made some adjustments today based on some of the feedback that we got last time. So that feedback is gold to make sure that the remaining 2 sessions are going to be as optimized for you guys and that you're getting what you want out of that. So let us know. I also wanted to let you guys know about an event that's coming up on December 23rd called the Kosher Great Boss Workshop. This is actually an EOS event. It's going to be led by 2 of my very, very good friends, Ben Berman and Svi Schwartz. They're expert EOS implementers, so they're a little bit they've been doing this a few more years than I have, so they're really, really some of my top mentors. It's in Nyack, so it's in the Muncie area. These Great Boss workshops are going on around the country, but we felt that there was a need for a Hamish one that because a lot of times people are hesitant to go because the food's not going to work for them and there's not going to be separate seating and things like that. So we've actually started one for the religious community. So if anybody wants more information on that, there's a flyer there. It's December 23rd. It's a full day at the Nyack Seaport. We've got a limited time special on that. It's going to be kosher catering, separate seating. And if you have any other questions on that, let me know. And there's going to be a link there as well. If you want to learn a little bit more, no pressure whatsoever. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that this existed. It's a great networking opportunity. And otherwise, thank you. See you next week. And again, that QR will help you download my contact information if you need it. I'll stay on for another couple minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, have an amazing day. Have an amazing week, and I'll see you all next Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, all right, Adam, thank you again. That was awesome.
My pleasure.
And, yes, okay, people were really engaged, and I always to figure out, it's always we had 30 people the first week, now we're down to 16. But they get
could be because it's Thanksgiving week also. Hopefully it's not
Okay.
because people get value out of the last one.
maybe let's done the kafsuchos, but we'll send them all the recordings and the slide, and looking forward to next week in Mr. Shem.
So
Amazing.
one
Thank
thing,
you guys.
Adam, I wanted to say thank you. Yesterday I was shooting an event, and it was a very high people event, and I found this guy that could help me a ton. And thanks to like all this, pushing and just like going somewhere, I just like started talking with this guy, and he's like, call me tomorrow. And So like, you know what, you are empowering people to like really pursue dreams and you know, let people are stuck in places. And I think this course just like helps you like really go so much forward, and like your vision, just open your vision and see that actually there is a way to get there. So thank you.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, we're trying to create the opening. We're trying to create that compelling vision, because when people see where you're going, the right people are going to just line up and want to help. So
Right.
that's awesome. Great to hear that.
Thank you.
Glad you got
Yeah.
out of it.
Alrighty.
All right.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.
Very good.
Thank you,
I'll
Rabbi.
see you guys next week, and you can all reach me if you need me.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.